For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/BrucePointset. Okay, welcome back to the Church of Can't Stop, Won't Stop, where we use Can't Stop, Won't Stop, a history of the hip hop generation by Jeff Chang, and relate it back to just the history and the present of, the story of hip hop in Portland. I got a special guest with me today. It's almost like a homecoming of sorts.
Yeah.
Because, I got Wynne in here, who's also from, I'm from Lake Oswego, Oregon, and, just making waves, not just in Portland, but across the country. So, Wynne, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So today we're talking about Chapter 8, Zulus on a Time Bomb, Hip Hop Meets the Rockers Downtown. And I thought it would be a pretty apt chapter to discuss, just because it kind of really hones in on the sort of like cross-cultural connections that were really starting to be made during hip hop. Like it had, birthed out of the South Bronx and divestment, benign neglect, but it started moving, especially with graffiti, especially with breakdancing becoming really popular in the early 80s. So then you had like downtown New York and like a punk rock scene, among other things, and sort of like the art scene really start taking investment in it. And I wanted to like kind of parallel that to a moment in Portland. I was at a show, I want to say like February last year. It was like right before everything started locking down. It was the Swiggle Mandela show. And I remember someone getting on stage and just kind of like, just doing the roll call at different places, obviously like Portland, Gresham, et cetera, et cetera. But like he shouted out LO, and I was like, man, this is different. I have, who was talking about my people in LO, but then I was like, I can relate that directly to my guest today, though.
Yeah.
Because like that, when that has to be, I blame you, but
I know. Well, usually they don't shout out LO. They just call me out whenever they see me standing in there. I've never heard an LO shout out, so I can't help you on that one. I don't know why.
Yeah, for those who may not know, Lake Oswego is a suburb of Portland. It's very known for many things. The nickname Lake No Negro, most notably, but just like it's not always been plugged in, or for obvious reasons with Portland. So like I said, that moment, the bubble.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that really, so when I look at someone like yourself who's just like, you've come up, you've had some of this success, and I feel like it's also one of the things that I think is really notable is just like, I really cannot find someone who will say a bad word about you. Like I've, even like I recorded this, and I don't say that just to like butter you up, but like I recorded this like kind of like jokey promo video, when I was talking with Mac and Verbs, who, personalities in the city, hosts of the Thesis, and just like, just recording this video to like stir up some controversy, and Verbs just randomly was like, yeah, Wynne, you can't rap. But the funny thing is like not even like half a second on the full video, for like right after, it's like, no, I love Winnie. I can't. Like but I think that's, just from getting to know you a little bit over like this last year, I just noticed like, I think that has to probably come from just like the way you move is very, like, it seems like you're very conscious of just being, quote unquote, like a good person, but like really just being a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like conscious of your position, and just like, again, just, generous, giving of your time, but then also, like, yeah, I'm in a position of privilege and I'm going to use it, but also just be genuine with people. So I'm not sure, is that like a really like conscious thing, or is it just kind of like
Um, it's very, I got into hip hop because a lot of people ask me why, being from LO, this art form spoke to me. And specifically, I can't tell you why. I can't tell you that I related to the stories that I was hearing. I can't tell you that I related to the people specifically, but I related to this sense of outcast. Growing up in LO, didn't really feel like I fit in there, and um, didn't really have a lot of friends. And so I got into music out of like a necessity to be heard and like have an outlet and have a friend. And I was just blown away by the way that people were putting words together, and felt like this was, growing up in such a bubble, this was my way to hear like what's going on in the rest of the world, because we don't hear about it there. And I think I'm just very quiet and shy by nature. And I think that I guess that's kind of why you say just the way I move. I'm not someone who's looking for a lot of attention. And because my existing in a space in hip hop is very consciously of where I'm from and how I didn't really relate to it either. And I understood all the perceptions of it, make me hyper aware of the way it comes across to other people. So I try not to step on any toes. I walk a very thin line of like repping the Portland scene, because, this is the scene I'm a part of and the community that's welcomed me, and also not knowing the struggles of a lot of the people who have come out of Northeast and have been pushed out, and that area has been gentrified. So, when people outside of Portland know me as being from Portland. So when I go and talk to radios, or when I'm doing interviews for blogs or whatever, it's always very like, well, I'm from a suburb of there, and I can't actually tell specific stories about the struggles of being a hip hop artist in Portland, because when I came into the scene, I had already started kind of establishing my name. Actually, right around the same time that I entered the Portland scene is when I started to get more social media attention. So I can't relate to a lot of those struggles, so I don't tell them. And I think that's, what's helped me make a lot of friendships here. I've always kind of known who I am and what I want to do and what I represent.
Yeah, and that kind of contrasts with really like the end of this chapter, where it talks about Malcolm McLaren and this Duck Rock project. And I'm just gonna read a quick couple passages from that.
What page are you on?
I'm on 164.
Okay.
Yeah, for the viewers out here, we got the books too.
Yeah.
Can prepared. So yeah, it says McLaren told journalists that in darkest South Africa, he had regaled the Zulus with tales of the Sex Pistols, which inspired them to pen some of Duck Rock's songs. But this was just his crude imperialist fantasy. In fact, far from being folk songs he had discovered in a distant village, the township jive and merengue songs had been local pop hits in the 70s, replayed note for note by pickup bands in Johannesburg and New York City. Then fast forward through some of that, and second to the last paragraph in the chapter, despite McLaren's ambitions, Duck Rock never became the great hip hop swindle. Instead of McLaren swallowing hip hop devoured him.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's a natural reaction I see just like from that. But I don't know, that just really like stood out to me, as far as, because we're always talking about like cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
But like the power, like that really just showed like the power of the culture in my mind. But yeah, did you have any, like I said, you kind of just like laughed reading that, but
yeah, I mean,
reactions?
It's a very well put way of saying that hip hop culture is the biggest influence on the world right now, and has been for, quite a long time, regardless of how many people in higher positions want to admit that. And It's very well put to say, instead of McLaren swallowing hip hop devoured him, because, you know, that's why you don't see people appropriating culture last for very long. Hip hop appreciates authenticity and people being themselves. And when you're coming into the culture to take something from it, you're just gonna get devoured. You're not gonna last. It doesn't play well. And there have been so many times where people have tried to take things in hip hop and flip them for profit, which is, you know, some of what this chapter discusses, and just the white liberal perspective of that and how that's hard to accept, which we're seeing a lot of in Portland, kind of going through our own little mini version of this now. And the more you see people deny it and try to capitalize on it in ways that aren't authentic, the more true stories come out, and those people just don't last there. And then it says later, Bambaataa himself would chuckle at the mention of McLaren's name and dismiss him with 2 words, culture vulture. Like, that shit happens so fast. You've really got to know your shit and respect what you're stepping into, because hip hop is larger than life. And there's somewhere else in this chapter where it says, I think it was talking about Fab Five Freddy, and just how he realized he was kind of witnessing a new culture take form. And it was something about, in order for a culture to exist, it needs music, dance, and art, or something like that. I can't remember what page it's on, but yeah, you can't fuck with culture. You just can't, especially when it's not yours. And if you don't respect that, then you'll get devoured.
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious, like, you know, when you were kind of like getting into the local scene, like, as far as just like, I guess, like, people who you kind of like went to or looked at as like early, whether it be like mentors or just kind of like, you know, I guess supporters, you know, fellow artists, like, are there any people that stand out in particular?
Definitely. I came into the scene because I released a song called Catalyst, which is just like 6 minutes of me rapping. And there was a DJ named Avalanche who reached out to me, and he was like, yo, I'm trying to connect you with Star Child. He's just a legend in the Portland scene. And, you know, they're throwing this show for Team Backpack in Portland. And just for some context, I grew up competing in Team Backpack, doing ciphers, and, you know, trying to make a name for myself as like a cipher artist, like an MC, and had never made it onto like an official Team Backpack cipher because I was like 15. And I'd gone down to LA and competed and made it to the top 20 and then didn't get in. And so when I was told they were coming to Portland to do a cipher here, I was tripping. And that Star Child was kind of curating it and picking the artists to go on it. And Star Child reached out to me and gave me that opportunity. And we shot that in the beginning of 2017. It didn't come out till 2018. That ended up being the video that went viral, as Eminem's daughter. But Star Child was probably my biggest champion in the scene. He was constantly, you know, going, I'll never forget. Anytime he would put me on a show, or anytime I was even in the building just watching the show, he would stop it and call me out and be like, yo, we got Wynne in the building. She's super white. She's from Lake Oswego, but she raps. This girl can rap better than all of you. And then would call me up on stage and I would rap. And was constantly just trying to introduce me to people, introduce me to OG1, to DJ Cliff, and, you know, kind of the godfathers of Portland hip hop right now. And from there, I just started connecting with other artists. So I played that Team Backpack show with Samurai, the producer, who ended up producing some stuff for me on my If I May project. I tried to do everything I could to just kind of like pick the brains of the people who have been doing it here for a while. I first heard about Mike Capes when I was in high school. And because he was kind of coming up around the same time as Amine. And there was a friend of a friend. I was at a birthday party and she was like, oh, you rap? Like, have you heard of Mike Capes and Amine? And kind of put me onto their stuff. So I had known about Capes for a while. And after kind of coming into the Portland scene, I went and grabbed coffee with him at Deadstock. And we sat there for like 2 or 3 hours. I just kind of talked to him about songwriting and what it's been like coming up in Portland. I did the same thing with Versatile, which shout out to Verse, he's incredibly dope. And try to talk to him about touring, because I was at a place in my career where I really wanted to get on the road, and Versus, he's toured, he's done national things, and that was super valuable information that I wanted to learn from him. He gave me a lot of tips that I still remember and reference to this day. Like when I got off tour with Earth Gang, I remember Verse saying, like, be wary of post-tour depression, because you're on the road and you're the artist. So you're out there meeting people whose lives you've changed and shaking hands with people, and you've got fans and people are catering to you. You're the artist. You get back home and you're not Wynne anymore. You're just going to be Cena, and you don't have this dopamine every night of getting on stage and rocking. Like, you're just back home and suddenly, like that, everything's normal. And when I came home, about 3 days later is when everything went into lockdown and the pandemic hit. So the post-tour depression was very real, and I don't know that I would have been prepared for that if I hadn't braced for it, thanks to Versatile's words. But just a few names. I can name so many more. Blossom, who's an incredible R&B singer here, and can rap too, by the way. A lot of people who just kind of fucked with me and loved me for who I was, and it was mutual, and just started building a community by going to shows and trying to support people where I could, and vice versa.
Yeah, that and that kind of really gets to, again, when we look at like the antithesis of like the Malcolm McLaren approach, where it's like really, not just like immersing yourself in the scene, but like seeking people out, seeking these people with knowledge, seeking these people, one, we're kind of like in the place you want. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that's what white people do, is they walk into a room and they start giving orders and they start acting like they know shit. And in actuality, they don't. And so when I'm walking into the hip hop scene and I've been grandfathered in by Star Child and OG1 and Cliff and Avalanche and Cool Nuts, like, I don't want to walk in there and act like I know what I'm doing. Like, I've never been a part of this scene before. And all of these people have been here for, some of them 20 plus years, playing shows and watching the city change and evolve. And I can't act like I've been there. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I never got a chance to meet Star, but I remember listening to like his Sunday night show on 95.5 back when I was in like junior high, right? And it's it's interesting when you talk about, like, especially with that like advice from Verse on touring. I got a chance to like interview him, Cool Nuts, OG1 for when I was a reporter. And it's like, even though I'm not, like, I'm not a musician, I'm not, an artist like that, but like some of the stuff they say as far as just like the business of it and, thinking outside, like, you still want to be proud of where you're from, but also thinking outside and thinking bigger.
Right.
Like that's been helpful for me as just a writer.
Absolutely.
So kind of to that, to the point about sort of like the scene, and you talk about Fab Five Freddy earlier, there's another quote he had in there about, just like seeing himself as a, as like a fine artist, like really, saying, I envision, what we're doing in this, like, this graffiti scene. I want this in, like galleries and museums. I want that respect.
Right.
And I kind of like parallel that to Portland hip hop in that, one of the things, like, I got out of college and graduated in 2011, go Ducks. Yeah, and like went to the scanner, I started doing a lot more music coverage because like I said, I listened to, some artists, new Lifesavers, new Cool Nuts, new Star, but it was kind of like what I heard, on the radio on like 95.5 and KBOO. And, I had kind of like gotten out of it when I was in college, and then I kind of got back into the scene. And just one of the things that really like took me was just the depth of talent, just like how many, like, there's all these different sounds, but then just like, I don't know, like everyone talks about, I've seen this recurring conversation of, who's going to put Portland on the map, who's going to do this, do that. And I'm just like, sometimes I don't know if we almost miss just like, obviously as artists, y'all want to put your work out to everywhere, but like just as far as like just how much is here,
Right.
and like that hunger, like I'm not sure, like from your perspective as an artist, do you see that as far as just like that, even though like again we've had people who've broken out nationally in a big way, but like there still seems to be like that hunger, at least as far as just like the city wanting that respect. I'm not
Oh
sure
yeah. I think Portland has a lot to prove. It's a big underdog city. There's a lot of outsider perceptions of what Portland is, and the hip hop scene doesn't necessarily reflect that. And so I think it's a lot of like, like we're trying to prove ourselves as artists, as a scene, and not just in hip hop, kind of, I mean, not just in rap, but kind of like, this book talks about, there's so many other mediums that are blossoming in hip hop right now. A lot of people are starting clothing lines, and there's a lot more designers, painters, graffiti artists, and it's Portland's such a booming art city that it feels like, the lid's about to pop off of everything just kind of boiling and bubbling, and it's taking longer than a lot of people want it to. So there's a lot of just tension of like, come on, like let's get things going. So that's why I try to do as much as I can as someone with a larger platform to always kind of point the camera back towards this way, because there's so many dope people here, and people who like genuinely care about not only the art of it and the music, but community, which is lacking so severely just in society today. And the fact that in Portland we have things like the Thesis, things like Mic Check, shout out to Cliff, where artists can get together, even the produce market that happens on Saturdays, where people are trying to put on for other local artists. And, if I have an opportunity to reach some kind of national radio coverage or national blog post or something to just kind of shout out like, yo, there's things happening here. So look around, because, it's really only a matter of time.
Yeah, and you kind of point out to just as far as like just the community involvement of so many artists around here. There's so many artists who are, they're like full-time teachers during the day.
Yeah.
They do a lot of like, you talked about Mike earlier, and just like, just the youth work he was doing even back when like I first met him,
Yeah.
and and then now I think especially with this past year and past 2020, where you saw like hip hop was at the center of a lot of these protests, but most arguably, whether it's, people leading, organizing,
it was a
like,
lot of hip hop artists out there leading these protests. It was a lot of them.
Yeah. It's like, when it just talks about like, even without, there's more institutional support now than maybe in past years, but it's still, it's still an uphill battle. And yet, in spite of that, it feels like hip hop is doing so much to just shape, especially Portland Metro, but even throughout the state.
Yeah. I also want to shout out, you earlier asked me about mentors in Portland, and just kind of on that tip of people giving back to community. This is a deep cut, but when I was 15 years old, I auditioned for America's Got Talent when they came to Portland. And in my audition, I met Mighty. You know Mighty?
Yeah.
He was
I don't know him, but I know of him.
Yeah, he was auditioning too. And at the time, I wasn't in the hip hop scene, but Mighty was like, yo, like, you're dope. We should link up sometime. Like, I would love to just kind of help you out. And Mighty was working at the Boys and Girls Club in Portland. And I went out there one day with my mom or my dad, I can't remember. And the way those kids like looked up to him, and there's so much of that in Portland, like you mentioned, Capes, people out here who are making music for the community and speaking for those kids and their struggles and the same stuff that they grew up with, and still putting out that music and still working with those kids. And seeing the way they looked up to him, I went and sat with Mighty, and there were always kids coming up to him saying like, Mighty, I'll show you this. He was teaching them how to rap. told me what kind of mic to get for my first mic. It was a Bluebird mic, and I did get it. Thank you, Mighty. But yeah, and just, kind of like you were saying about the protests, and it was dope to see every day going out there and seeing different artists. They even had like performers out there. They had slam poetry, really, and because they're poets, really beautiful speeches, and also the amount of like murals and artwork that's that are still up downtown. I think that's a big connection that I read in this chapter, just about how once graffiti was starting to be everywhere and it was happening downtown, and that kind of conflict of people's impressions with it, of like, oh no, this is dirty, this is an art, it's ruining things, or like, no, this is beautiful, this is self-expression. And now kind of seeing that same reaction happening in Portland, where downtown you see a lot of upper class people who are working in the buildings downtown, but maybe live in LO or maybe live up in the hills, and they're pissed about it. They don't want to see all these murals downtown on the buildings they work at. And the communities out there like, yo, this is beautiful. These are people connecting with people. You just walk by, you see something, you immediately connect with it. And it's more than just sterile buildings, and like, what's the point of that if no one's connecting to each other? It's just capitalism. It's kind of disheartening to see. And that's just Portland in a nutshell. But
I feel that. Like, I did a few years ago for their kind of like diversity day at Lake Oswego Junior High. I was working with a student doing a presentation on public art. And one of the things we did was kind of like contrast, let's take a look at some pictures of what public art looks like in Portland. And, Portland still has a lot of work to go. But, then we looked at like LO and kind of like, one kind of like the art that's there, but then also talked about, that there are certain, like, you can't, there's certain rules against murals, billboards, that you just can't like have it in LO. And what is it,
right.
What does the community lose when you have that? Just because like you said, sterile, there's no personality. You just drive through, like whenever I go to see my parents, I'm just driving through this neighborhood, and I tell people like, no, it really does feel like Get Out. Like, it is sterile and creepy.
It's like a simulation. It's very like everything matches and everything's perfect, and the flowers are very well kept. And I talk a lot about this with Ty, because when you go anywhere outside of the city, it's almost like you aren't thinking about the world's issues in real time, because Portland, especially right now, is such a real-time reflection of just the bigger issues around the world, and specifically this country. And when you step outside of the city, that stuff isn't right in front of your face all the time. But you go downtown or anywhere, and it's like, oh wow, the world is in a dark place. We as a city are in a very dark place. And for all of these people who live in the suburbs and just outside, like, it's privilege. You don't have to look at it every day, and therefore you don't feel like it's your problem, and you don't have to act on it. And that's just 10 minutes of removal, but it's a world of a difference.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's just kind of like it's like the perfect metaphor for kind of like this human condition we're in.
Yeah.
But I guess the more optimistic side of me says, again, but like all these opportunities, like whether it's with public art, because like, yeah, you commission that. We're talking about jobs for people. We're talking about activities for youth, like even stuff that's not like necessarily going to be like displayed anywhere, but just as like an activity, like it's at My People's Market, and they just had just a graffiti board where had some family friends from out of town, and I have my parents who are different generation. We're all just throwing up whatever it is with our our non graffiti skills, but it's just it's an opportunity to engage, and it's an opportunity to do more activities, and just again.
It's sad to watch, because people are innately creative, like it's in all of us, but that's discouraged kind of at such a young age, whether you're doodling while you're trying to focus because it helps you, or you want to be an artist and people tell you, oh, you're probably not going to be able to be an artist, you need to make money, you should try something else. Like, art just is, it's not funded, and it's not encouraged as a career path, and it's not taken seriously. So people, once they reach kind of their adult phases, they look down on it when they see it publicly, maybe because they wanted to do something like that and it didn't work out for them, or because they see less of those people because it's not a real job, quote unquote. But it's like, they're like, that's in you, and if you wanted to tap into that and kind of and look into yourself, it's self-expression, and it's turning the way you feel inside into a tangible thing, and that's what's going to help you connect to other people. So it's dope to, you know, to hear stories like that of you and your family just throwing up stuff on graffiti wall, because it's like, you know, that's how people connect, and that's how it's been for 30,000 years, longer than that. Like, ever since humans have been around, it's been self-expression via art, whatever that looks like.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, especially, like I said, in this moment right now, in these times where it was, you know, like obviously, you know, there's a lot of the issues we all see on the news, but then even there's a lot going on in Portland right now. And just like providing outlets for people, again, just to express their creativity, to build community. It's so necessary. But yeah, so I got two more questions, one serious, one messy and stupid. So we'll go serious first. You know, you talked about just you know, just kind of like some of the events, whether it be like mic check, thesis, you know, we got, you know, PDX Hip Hop Week. You know, we talked about, again, like sort of the institutional embrace that's happening right now. But as far as like just from your perspective as an artist, like where do you see things kind of going for Portland hip hop, just even like these next few years?
That's a great question. It has never been more accessible to become an artist, with just the way that the internet is rapidly growing, and the usership of platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Well, Instagram also, they're kind of falling off, but TikTok's growing insanely. People are going viral on there all the time. So it gives way more of an opportunity for, you don't have to live in LA anymore. You don't have to live in New York. You can live in Portland and go viral for your art. So as that starts happening, and as more people start getting recognized in Portland, which I think is inevitable as the music here continues to be dope over the coming years, artists will just get more looks. Unfortunately, like the way to get on playlists, which is the way to be discovered on Spotify, and the way to get connected with major publications like Fader and Pigeons and Planes, like you have to have connections and resources. And once you start gaining some momentum and building your platform on socials, those things start to open up and you start to get more opportunities. And we're starting to see that happen in Portland now. Especially Airst, who started releasing you know, projects for Dante and Boca, started getting playlist placements for these artists. And I know Ep is about to release his project, expecting him to do really well too. Solomon, Capes, like Capes charting on the iTunes charts. People are starting to get those looks and starting to get those fans, building kind of this grassroots movement that starts in your city. And that's how things maintain, you know. If you blow up out of here and you don't have a foundation that it's built on, it's less likely to last. So I think the next couple of years of Portland is going to involve a lot more artists getting bigger social media looks, just because of the consistency at which they're outputting music, and thus getting more playlist looks and starting to grow their brand. I hope Portland kind of lands on a sound. Right now, it's a lot of influence from different areas of the country, a lot of Bay and LA sounds. And I hope that Portland, that's a staple of every city that's come out of hip hop, you know, or not out of hip hop, but just in making music. Cities that have been notable for rapping: Detroit, Chicago, New York, the South, Atlanta, LA, the Bay, like people have sounds, and that's what they're known for. So whether it's a collective Northwest Seattle Portland thing, I hope that more local artists start working with more local producers and kind of putting our heads together of like, okay, how do we want to be as a city? And having less of a crabs in a barrel mentality and more just, you know, that Atlanta mentality of like, yo, if I'm going, my brother's going, and my brother's friend and my brother's friend's cousin, like we're all gonna do this. So I hope that is kind of the shift that starts happening in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of like hope that, you know, people kind of, they just like look at Portland, you know, just like I said, because of how much talent there is out here, just looking at like, you look at like an Oakland or Houston or these places that kind of, you know, even if it was like a more kind of, I guess, like for lack of better terms, DIY type scene or come up, but you know, I don't know, I feel like the country's missing out in some ways, but hopefully that'll change. So I lied. I actually have one more serious question, which of course is, you know, you got any new projects you would like to, you know, let people know about?
I can't let them know about it yet, but I do.
Okay.
And I'm stoked because it's gonna be a hometown Portland situation, which is exciting. And I'm hoping if I don't get the whole thing out before Thanksgiving, somebody else messed up. But it's coming soon.
Duly noted. Noted.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've had a chance to kind of tour around the country, you know, see other scenes. And I just, you know, again, like getting back and like covering Portland hip hop, I just felt like, is it just me or do we just have the best white rappers? Like sorry, like, you know,
that's good. You
got the Wynnes, you got the Milks, you got the, you know, the kind of like the old guards who've been doing it, the Ilmacs, the only ones.
No, actually make a really good point. I've never thought of it that way, and I don't think you're wrong. I really don't think you're wrong. Shout out to Milk. Milk's crazy. My boy Smythe Spinach, he's dope too. It's a lot of white rappers over here that give a fuck about hip hop.
Yeah, I'm like I said, you know, I know
it makes sense statistically too, just like with how many white people are here, that there's at least got to be like a couple, you know.
True.
More than other cities.
I am not sure, you know, it'd be a tricky thing to like market of being like, Portland, we got white rappers. But I just saying, I would, you know, if we're putting out starting fives, I like Portland. I'm just saying.
I do too. Good point. Super valid.
So on that note, Wynne, thank you again for, you know, taking the time to come into the church of Can't Stop Won't Stop.
Of course.
Yeah, you know, best of luck on future endeavors, future projects that you can't talk about right at this moment, but you know, we will be on the lookout. So
absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward to finishing this book and having further conversations.
Definitely.